During these times of physical distancing, during the coronavirus, I feel like I'm in a timeout. You know, when you were a child and you weren't playing well with others, so you were given a timeout to examine your behavior. So I'm examining my behavior these days, trying to use this time well to examine my behavior to see how can I play well with others when it's time for us to be able to reunite again. And so during this separation, I thought it's fitting to reflect upon the most great separation that happened in 1863 in Baghdad when Baha'u'llah was exiled. It was such a time of grieving that his followers, some said they preferred to die rather than to be separated from him. And even the townspeople who were not Babis were grieving. So Baha'u'llah created from this most great separation a most great reunion. He created a sorrowful occasion of separation into one of reunion and joy. And so I thought if we reflect upon this now, it might help us to deal with this separation we're experiencing. Ridvan means paradise. And on this day in 1863, the potentiality to realize paradise was given to us. You know, since the book of Genesis, we've been told that we're made in the image and likeness of God. But really, before now, it wasn't possible. During the age of prophecy, we weren't able to mirror and reflect as the image and likeness of God. But on this day in 1863, the age of fulfillment began in that every atom was reinvigorated with a new potential. Baha'u'llah says that on this day, all creation passed away, and that all creation was revolutionized. Now, many of us know the historical facts, or at least some of them, regarding these 12 days of Ridvan. We know on the first day, it was when Baha'u'llah went to the garden in the middle of the river with some of his sons and his amanuensis. And then on the 9th day, his family joined him. And that then on the 12th, he mounted his steed and left Baghdad for Constantinople in this new station. For the first time, mounting a roan stallion. For the first time, wearing a taj, indicating this new station of a manifestation of God. So there were physical indications of the spiritual transformation that went on. But I have never quite grasped the significance of this day. But recently, the House of Justice published a book called Days of Remembrance, which is a series of tablets by Baha'u'llah about the holy days. And there are 95 pages on Ridvan. And some of these tablets have never been available in English before. And I got so excited reading some of them, the drama of them. And there were dramatic dialogues. And it's helped me to get a little bit of a glimpse. And so I thought, well, gee, if we have this potential today to reflect the image and likeness of God, let's explore this. And one of the things I've discovered is that previous to this age, we not only weren't capable of reflecting the image and likeness of God, but we didn't want to. We actually clung to our separation. Because if God is one, like the sun, you know, none of the rays of the sun are separate in the sense of having little identity groups. It's one, and yet humanity has never wanted to be one. It's clung to this tribalism, you know, whether it pertained to nation or class or race. And so it's only now that we have the potential, but do we have the desire? So now that we can be one, and as we're home separated from each other, to consider how we can be one. And with these series of videos that I would like to share during these 12 days, I'd like us, to explore it. Because a lot of people have been wondering what to do with this separation time right now, home alone. And I often thought that, when I'm home by myself and don't know what to do, sometimes I'll put on the TV or reach for the phone or maybe get in my car. And I thought, isn't this interesting that it's almost like I don't like myself? Like I don't want to be alone with myself. And I'd almost rather be invaded by something from outside. There's a lot of good TV programs, but sometimes it's just noise, and sometimes it's commercials, and often social media can make you depressed because you realize you're not as successful as a lot of other people. So I thought, okay, how can I use this time of separation, of alone time, to examine how I want to create my environment? And so psychology tells us that there's been a divided self, that often we are alienated from ourself, and that's caused a lot of psychological illness. And when I was in the store last week, shopping during this crisis, I saw a little bit of the animal meat come out, which I didn't like, and looking out for myself and a little bit of hoarding, let me get that before somebody else does. And I thought, wow, whatever happened to what Abraham Lincoln called the better angel of my nature? And I realized, we can know these phrases like the earth is one country and mankind its citizens, but how can I really put it into practice? Baha'u'llah says, Jesus said, love your neighbor as yourself. Baha'u'llah says, prefer your neighbor to yourself. That's a tough one. But mothers do it all the time. So we know it's possible. So I thought, wow, in all the hero myths and movies, there's often a sense of separation. Often they have to separate from home. And then they go through all these tests. Now, because they're movies and films, it's usually a physical separation, but it's often about a return. So, for example, Dorothy leaves Kansas, Oz she goes to, returns to Kansas, and all of a sudden, home is a different place. Odysseus leaves Ithaca, spends 20 years on his Odyssey, comes back to Ithaca in a very new condition. And of course, the Israelites, when they left Palestine, enslaved in Egypt, when they come back, it's a promised land. And in these myths and movies, the return is symbolic. Yes, it's a physical return, but more importantly, it's about a return to oneself. It's of actualizing one's highest or true self. And so it's, like in baseball, you're at home plate when you're a batter, but when you come back home, the reason why the crowd cheers is because you've scored a run. You're in a new condition. And so we might be separated and sitting at home, but we're also on a bit of a quest right now to actualize our best self. Because perhaps some of us, or all of us at some times, are divided from our highest self. So if we reflect upon how Baha'u'llah was able to transform physical separation from Baghdad into a psychological and spiritual reunion that was timeless. In other words, what he revealed that day has provided the potentiality and the basis to make us united with ourselves and with all people for all time. So Ridvan means paradise because we can realize it. There's a poem that I like, and one of the last lines is the end of all our exploring will be to arrive where we started and know that place for the first time. So maybe this home we're sitting in, which is symbolic of ourself, maybe we can begin to know it for the first time as we begin to know ourselves in a new way for the first time. Because that's what Baha'u'llah gave us with this day, the ability to be our best selves. Really to be at home everywhere. He said on this day that all created things were immersed in a sea of purification. So that seems to me that we were given a clean slate. So then what do we choose to write upon that slate? Now, we know it's not simply poetry when Baha'u'llah says all things were made new on this day, because we have tapped into the potential of this age of fulfillment scientifically. All our mass communication and mass transportation advances have come since the mid-19th century. So we know it's possible. But if we've got this clean slate that we can etch anything upon it, and if every atom has indeed been endowed with a new potentiality, Baha'u'llah says all creation was revolutionized on this day. He said, and I'll read the quote, he said, all created things, through the creative word, no sooner had that first word proceeded than the whole creation was revolutionized. Through that word, the realities of all things were shaken, were divided, scattered, separated, combined, and reunited, disclosing entities of a new creation. So that seems to me then that the greatest achievements of the past, whether it was a Francis of Assisi or a Shakespeare or a Mozart or a Joan of Arc, that we can exceed those accomplishments of a Leonardo da Vinci in this day. But we do exist in the physical world. We're sitting in our physical homes. And so it's important to review the context of Ridvan, in addition to the text about Ridvan that Baha'u'llah has given us. But the text that I have found really helpful, and I suggest that we look at that text together, is Days of Remembrance. Not Call to Remembrance, that's a different book. But Days to Remembrance, as I said, is a collection of tablets by Baha'u'llah about the holy days that the House of Justice published 4 years ago. And there are 95 pages just about Ridvan. Some of the tablets we've seen before in gleanings, but some we've never seen in English before. And if you don't have the physical copy, it's available as a PDF if you go online to Baha'i Reference Library, or if you go to Baha'i Bookstore website, it's available as a Kindle as well. Excuse me. Now, I'm not a scholar. I don't have any specialized knowledge about this. I'm just a fellow Baha'i. But I think if we take this exploration together, we might be able to learn from each other and to realize why in the future there'll be such a celebration for these 12 days. Like at Christmas time, it's often a big vacation, and people don't go to work or to school. And so I can imagine these 12 days of Ridvan in the future being such, as Baha'u'llah says, the most great festival, such a joyous celebration, because we'll be realizing the image and likeness of God, not only in our own beings, but in all creation, because all things were made new. And so if we go through some of these tablets together, I think we can celebrate this reunion with our true selves after centuries of being alienated from them. And we're going to come out of this separation, this time of physical distancing. And we're going to come into this reunion. And so I think if we're able to have this collective consciousness, the Guardian said that in order to have collective security, we have to first take collective responsibility for each other through the collective consciousness of the oneness of humanity. Because only then, with that consciousness, will we take the collective action that will lead to the collective security that will create world peace. And so people clinging to narrow allegiance today are making a lot of noise, but they're going to go the way of the dinosaurs. And we're going to explore what this reunion is going to look like and can look like in these next 12 days. So let's conclude today by sharing some of the words Baha'u'llah said about today. What hath become of creation? Whither are gone all created things? Lo, the entire creation hath passed away. Verily we have caused every soul to expire. Excuse me. And have then called into being a new creation. The word of God hath been made manifest. No sooner had that first word proceeded than the whole creation was revolutionized. In this day, a great festival is taking place in the realms above. For whatsoever was promised in the sacred scriptures has been fulfilled. This is the day of great rejoicing. Happy Ridvan.